Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. It's hard to ignore the weather this week. I'm in a t-shirt. I had to dig out my sunglasses. It's nice, but it's not normal. Washington is having one of its warmest winters in recent history. We've got a National Weather Service meteorologist here to explain what this means for our region. But first, let's get you caught up. Olympic marmots are exclusive to Washington state, but their numbers are dropping. If you haven't seen one, they look like a brown, chunky squirrel that chirps and screams. They're all over Olympic National Park. Now the feds are considering whether the Olympic marmot should be added to the endangered species list. Researchers think the current population ranges between 2,000 to 4,000 marmots, with about 60% of known colonies disappearing over recent decades. Fish and Wildlife will now conduct its own research and studies to determine whether to list the Olympic marmot as endangered or threatened. Final reminder, the Seahawks Championship Parade gets underway at 11 a.m. No matter where you're going today, plan your route. Before you hop in the car, consider the following. Every one of the more than 20 roads on the parade route between Washington and Cedar will be closed during the parade. If you're taking the bus, you may need to walk a few extra blocks. Light rail trains between Linwood and Federal Way will run through downtown every 6 minutes until 6 p.m. The Sounder will be taking extra trips this morning. And you have a chance to own a piece of Seattle's movie theater history this week. SIFF plans to auction off movie posters from the recently closed SIFF Cinema Egyptian and the Harvard Exit Theater, which closed in 2015. Among the stack, John Wayne's Rio Bravo, a James Dean triple feature, and An American in Paris. All proceeds go to SIFF. The auction ends on the 16th. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. It's been a warm and wet winter in Seattle and across the state, much to the dismay of skiers and snowboarders who were hoping La Niña conditions would dump snow in the mountains.
We're in the heart of winter, a time when our local slopes should be packed with people, but this year the crowds are thin and the snow is even thinner.
Danny Hogan and Clinton Alden are PhD students in a mountain hydrology lab at the University of Washington. They're also skiers. This year, they say only the highest elevation areas in Washington have been lucky enough to get above average snow. Lower down, it's been rain, rain, rain.
And in Washington, we mostly have those low elevation locations.
Many of our ski areas, Snoqualmie Pass, Stevens Pass, those are at 3,000, 4,000 feet. They're relatively low elevation.
Historically, they say low snowpack years like this are not so common. Only 3 years had similar conditions, 2005, 2015, and 1981. And low snowpack is bad for more than just skiers.
In Washington, we have very wet falls and winters, but our summers are quite dry. So we really rely on that snowmelt in the summertime to provide water for us.
We were curious how this season's warmer conditions compare to previous years and what that might say about our fire risk this summer. Maddie Kristell is a meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Seattle. She's here to help us make sense of this unusually warm year. Maddie, appreciate you coming in. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
So it feels like there's been a bit of weather whiplash this year. Historic flooding in December, a 14-day dry spell in January. It was sunny and 50 degrees last week. What is going on this winter, and how does it compare historically?
Yeah, you're not wrong. We certainly have had a little bit of everything going on for us since the fall and winter began. Starting in December, that was our fifth wettest December in the period of record that we have for SeaTac, which is one of our climate sites. When we're looking at November through the end of January, this season was actually number 2 warmest.
Wow.
Yeah, on record at Seattle, at SeaTac.
Okay, so that's 4 months of data giving you that information right now.
Yeah, so just because we don't have all of February, and yet I just backed it up through November, and it's still number 2. That's pretty significant.
Okay. Are you surprised at what we're seeing this winter?
I feel like of all my winters here, there's always something to throw us.
Okay.
Yeah, just little curveballs here and there. And, just this one particularly, I think, is going to stand out to a lot of people going from the fifth wettest December to, abnormally warm temperatures in January and even this month.
Okay. What does that warm winter mean for the region?
It means a couple of things. I think, people generally are thinking about water supply and, of course, fire weather going forward. And with how abysmally low our snowpack is right now, that's certainly not a good indication for what the fire season might bring. As someone who is a fire weather meteorologist and an incident meteorologist who deploys to wildfire, I'm already kind of queuing in on this. And so we're starting kind of off on the wrong foot. We want snow in the mountains to keep the fuels nice and moist for a longer period of time, and we just do not have that right now, which is a bit of a bummer.
I do want to hear more about your thoughts on the dry summer and what it might mean for wildfires. But before we do, how might this all show up for Western Washington in the coming months?
Yeah, so certainly some questions are already being asked about, water supply, reservoir levels, and what we saw in December with all of that rain is that the reservoirs actually had to drop a lot of water to prevent, floods from getting worse. Our hydrologist at the office, Brent Bauer, one of his, big things he was keying in on in December was just the fact that a lot of that water, went off into Puget Sound and we weren't able to retain it for the water supply because that would have caused a bigger issue. So I think people with the December floods being fresh on the mind are like, hey, well, we should be okay, right? Well, it really has more to do with the snowpack and just the fact that we're starting the water year off not in a great spot.
I am so glad you brought this up because snowpack is important, and I'm not sure that our listeners understand why it matters that we have this precipitation in the form of snow and not just rain.
Right. No, that's a good question. And something that we look at is what we call snow water equivalent. And that's the amount of water that the existing snow up at elevation would be if you melted it all down and you got the depth of water. And that said, you want a higher snowpack. You want a lot of deep snow up there just to keep the vegetation nice and wet and be good for our rivers. The slow melt off, keep the river levels going pretty well. But right now, what we're seeing across a lot of the Cascade basins are snow water equivalent levels that are 40, even 30% of average. So these are really low. The North Cascades, there's a few points that are faring a little bit better. But when you look at all of the different basins, the Olympic basins, the Cascade basins, they're all really, really low. 30, 40, barely 50% of average.
Okay, just so we have it specifically, what does a decline in snowpack mean for the region?
Yeah, so when you don't have a winter where those snow water equivalent levels are good, anything 90, 100% or more, you have to be cognizant of just the fact that this could be impactful not only for, the fire season, certainly the utilities around the area are looking at supply, and we have a drought declaration still in effect from last year. So the state in general, and specifically Western Washington, there are still portions of it that are in drought.
And because you are, as you mentioned, an incident meteorologist at the National Weather Service, meaning you're trained to provide weather support when there's a fire, does this warm winter have you thinking about our fire risk this summer? What are you thinking?
It does. Certainly just, walking the dog in short sleeves the other day had me kind of thinking about it. And one of the things that, I tend to look at going into the early spring are what the fuels are doing. And so when we get probably towards the end of March into April and May, we're going to start to hone in on those fuel status probably a little bit earlier than we would have otherwise in previous seasons, just to get a gauge on what our risk levels are going to be as we head into the preseason and into early June. We've seen an increase in fire activity on the west side of the Cascades. We had the Bear Gulch fire last year in the eastern slopes of the Olympics. 2022 was a big year for us. And, we were in similar states from a snowpack level, going in those seasons. So it's certainly something that we're going to keep an eye on, and especially if the weather pattern aligns to add critical elements on top of, dry conditions, dry fuels. That's kind of the magic picture for us to get a bad situation happening.
Were climate scientists expecting this? Because honestly, I was waiting for snow. I thought we were supposed to have a cold La Nina year. I had my snowshoes ready.
Yeah, no, I think you're not the only one for sure. We did have what was forecast to be a weak La Nina. And so we would want to see, the folks at the Climate Prediction Center saying more like a strong La Nina, really cold La Nina, to get the type of snow that we're used to with La Ninas.
When you're all talking about this, what is the discussion like? Is this a climate change trend, a one-off? How are you thinking about this as climate scientists?
Yeah, certainly in the vein of climate change, I would certainly want quite a bit more data to see, trends more definitively. But when I look at again, this is the November through January climate sets that I have, 6 out of the 10 warmest November through Januaries occurred since the year 2000.
Is it possible we could make up some of this snowpack in a significant way to the end of the month? I mean, you do predictions ahead of time of what we may be seeing in terms of weather. What is the possibility there?
I'm glad you asked. Before I came here, I actually looked at the Climate Prediction Center's 6 to 10 day outlook.
Yeah.
Those are those big CONUS maps where you see the different shades of red and blue to discern above normal or below
I love my
normal.
weather maps from the National Weather Service.
We try. I looked at that, and for the next 6 to 10 days, it did show that the likelihood of the temperatures leaning below average was ticking up, and with that, there was a good section of green indicating above normal precipitation. So that, to me, seems to suggest that we could, in the next 6 to 10, maybe out to 14 days, get some colder systems in here, replenish some of the snowpack. The 8 to 14-day probabilistic snow was highlighting a slight risk for heavy snow in the Cascades, so I'm personally going to keep my fingers crossed for that. I think that would be great if we could recover a little bit, but we have a lot of ground to catch up on.
Yeah, I think we're at 40% snowpack. Is that the...
Yeah, generally 30 to 40% in the basins, which is pretty low.
Yeah, what's it going to take? I mean...
Oh, man, I wish I had a one-to-one to, catch us up necessarily, but I think at this point, we'll take anything we can get.
Given everything we've been talking about, how should people in the Seattle area think about this? Should we be conserving water? What should we be doing?
It's never too early to think about the ramifications of a bad fire season. Western Washington, all it would take, if we get the fuels dried out, if we had a big fire weather pattern, kind of similar to the Labor Day 2020 wind, something like that could be really catastrophic. So we've had seasons where the fuels have been ready to go, but we dodged the weather bullet. So for us, it's certainly going to be down to monitoring.
We've been talking a lot about declining snowpack and maybe the future here. I am curious, should ski resorts be thinking about whether or not they're going to be able to sustain themselves in the future? Will winter sports be different 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think we certainly got kind of a glimpse at it, right after what happened in December.
Yeah.
If we're going to trend warmer and these atmospheric rivers are going to just continue to hold more and more moisture and do what they did in December, I think not only is it a question of lack of snow, but infrastructure. I mean, we saw roads washed out and things, impacting people's ability to even go enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I think that this winter in particular was kind of a good, not necessarily not good for the ski resort by any means, and the people who enjoy them, but just something to be aware of, that it's also as much tied to infrastructure as it is to, just the temperatures and what the snow level's doing, for sure.
Yeah, that, and we are at the mercy of weather.
Yeah, always.
We are very tiny. Maddie Kristell is a meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Seattle. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thank you to our generous donors for your financial support. Want to win our hearts this Valentine's Day? Rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode was produced by Anna Marie Yanni. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tonight for Evening Headlines.